good morning and good afternoon, and depends on where you are. Welcome to this academic panel discussion session entitled Research Challenges, Opportunities, and Future Direction in Hydrogen Energy and Fuel Cells. And we have a wonderful five leading researchers from Canada's online. And there are Professor Aimy from University of Toronto, Professor Erik Kjeang from Fraser University on the other end of Canada, Professor Marc Rosen from Ontario Tech University, Professor Berg from University of Alberta, and Professor Shuhui Sun from INRS. Welcome the panelists, and I'm going to around the table to let the panelists introduce themselves briefly. So I'm going to alphabetically. So Aimy, please.
Thank you, Xianguo. Hello, my name is Aimy Bazylak, and I'm a professor in the Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering at the University of Toronto in Canada. My research is focused on clean energy technologies such as fuel cells, electrolyzers, and batteries. And I work with industry partners and other institutions to develop these technologies, specifically looking at multi-phase flows, material advancements, and looking at improving the electrochemical performance. Thank you.
Okay, Erik?
Hi, everyone. My name is Erik Kjeang. I'm a professor at Fraser University in School of Mechatronic Systems Engineering, also Canada Research Chair in Fuel Cell Science and Technology Development. I'm the director of my lab called Fuel Cell Research Lab, or FCReL for short. So fuel cells is our focus. We have 5 labs that are customized for fuel cell research, located at the SFU Surrey campus, Particle Labs, and Ballard Power Systems. We have about 25 people all working on fuel cells and related technologies. That includes primarily hydrogen PEM fuel cells and microfluidic cells, as well as flow batteries, and some activities on hydrogen storage to support the fuel cell developments. Our focus is on MEA, membrane electrode assembly design, as well as fuel cell durability. And we operate Canada's sole multi-scale X-ray computed tomography facility for that's hyphenated with operando testing and electrochemical diagnostics for fuel cell research, which is unique worldwide. And it enables 4-dimensional in situ and operando visualization of fuel cells and other electrochemical cells, can be applied to investigate dynamics such as degradation phenomena. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Erik. And Marc?
Thank you, Professor Lee, for having me here. Wonderful to be here. I am Marc Rosen. Yes, I am a professor at Ontario Tech University on the east side of Toronto, formerly University of Ontario Institute of Technology. I'm a professor in the Department of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering. I've been carrying out research for many years in the field of energy sustainability, with hydrogen as one of the key linchpins. We've had many projects related to hydrogen, particularly hydrogen production. I've been in the hydrogen game for quite a while, even going back to an Institute for Hydrogen Systems that spun out from the University of Toronto several decades ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Marc. And Peter?
Yeah, hello, my name is Peter Berg. Thanks for the invitation, Xianguo. I'm a professor of mathematics and physics at the University of Alberta. I came to Canada about 20 years ago when I began to enter the fuel cell field, working as a postdoctoral fellow within a project with Ballard Power Systems in Vancouver. And I've been working on fuel cell related issues ever since. A few years ago, I went to Norway for 3 years to work at the University of Norway, and that was interesting for me because I saw really how a country can use its revenues from the fossil fuel industry to invest heavily into the transition to renewables. And so I learned for life in Norway. Maybe we're going to talk about this a little bit today, how we can do this in Turkey and in Canada. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pete. And Shuhui?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for Professor Lee for kind invitation. My name is Shuhui Sun, a professor from INRS. The full name is we are French Institute. It's the Institut National de la Recherche Scientifique. I'm working on the Center for Energy, Materials, and Telecommunications. We are located in Montreal. So my research mainly focuses on nanomaterials for clean energy conversion and storage, including hydrogen fuel cells, hydrogen generation, and also for different kind of batteries. So I have been working on for hydrogen fuel cells for almost 20 years. We focus on different types of catalysts, basically include for low platinum PT catalyst, including single atom platinum, coil structures, and one-dimensional linear structures. This is the purpose to decrease the usage of platinum on the electrode. And the other main direction is for developing non-precious metal catalyst, such as the iron-based catalyst, to replace the platinum for hydrogen fuel cells. We have collaborated with General Motors and Bazylak for many years on different strategic grants. And in recent years, I also start some project on electro catalysts for hydrogen production. The purpose to build, for a hydrogen cycle. It's called hydrogen energy. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Okay, now before we formally start, just a quick message for our attendees. If you have any question for our panelists, please type it in the chat area, and then we will try to merge your question into the discussion if we can. Okay, so that now we're going to formally start our discussion. And before that, we'll just kind of give a little background that we know that since kind of last year, or by December last year, about 80% of world GDP for those economies in the world, they have a hydrogen strategy, either for their national or regional situation. And hydrogen energy and fuel cell has been considered essential for decarbonization of energy sector and for carbon neutrality by the middle of this century. And this is especially important if we look on the NDC submitted by different national governments for the next week's 26th session of the Conference of the Parties, that the hydrogen and the fuel cell had been on the national agenda or high in the national agenda. So with this as the background, so now we have the first question for our panelists, that what challenges do you see in the mass adoption of hydrogen and fuel cells? These challenges could be technical or non-technical, could it be, say, regional, cultural, social, as well as, legal, such as safety issues. So let's go, maybe start with Aimy.
Sure, thank you, Xianguo. I think that one of the biggest challenges is a socioeconomic one, because, as we understand the importance of climate change and all these things associated with anthropogenic climate change, carbon emissions. I think that for the general public, that it's not just a matter of education, but I think also that, getting people to prioritize climate change is a difficult one. So I think when you look at pushing hydrogen and clean energy, the challenge is to come at the side of what's a socioeconomic benefit for the people. And that can be, making so the decision is not for the altruistic, reasoning, but rather it is economical to choose clean energy. And then also, getting the public to understand how this is also about energy security and water security, and not just about, the immediate or the long-term concepts that they have of climate change. So I think that proving the socioeconomic benefits to to the public, I think, is one of the biggest challenges.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy. Maybe we're just alphabetic for the first round. So, Erik?
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with Amy. First of all, it's really a socio-economic dilemma, how to best implement and build the technology out for mass use. To add to that, I would say hydrogen infrastructure is probably my number one. The lack of existing hydrogen infrastructure. It's not like we're starting from scratch, because certain places have really strong hydrogen infrastructure, most notably in conjunction with oil and gas facilities like refineries, where there are currently the largest hydrogen users. But of course, the infrastructure needs to be available, and I think it can be often concerning and maybe even intimidating to invest in the technology if there's no appropriate hydrogen infrastructure. But of course, nobody wants to build a hydrogen infrastructure and pay a lot of resources for that if the users are not available or ready to invest in the usage side as well. So that's the chicken and egg that's well known in this field. But I prefer to point to the hydrogen infrastructure, because I think that the usage side is a little bit more easy to develop quickly if the hydrogen infrastructure exists, right? And so build it and they will come. Another issue, though, challenge is that there is a bit of a distraction, I think, going on in the community about hydrogen as a contender to batteries, and a lot of people are trying to defend batteries against the hydrogen, and not really realizing that there's actually a benefit of considering them together. The so-called hydricity society that was proposed many years ago, it's actually a very reasonable way to look at it, right? So that hydrogen can support electricity as an energy carrier, and can be complementary to battery electric vehicles. If we're going to reach 100% emissions reductions, we really do need hydrogen. And also, most people don't realize, I think, how mature the technology really is, that it really does exist and is available as an option. And I think, out there in the community, like we know in Vancouver, we have half a dozen hydrogen refueling stations by now, and there are fuel cell cars driving around on the roads, and most people still are not aware of that. We thought that we would be able to promote it at this point, but there's not much promotional activities going on. And there are incentives to procure hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, but I think the deployment is still rather slow. So I think that's also a challenge. Even if you have the infrastructure, there needs to be more of a cohesive agenda and push, and I think the government needs to play a big role in that. On the technical side, the technology exists, and as I mentioned, it's actually rather mature. So technical challenges are more related to cost reduction, and I think cost reduction needs to happen on the hydrogen infrastructure side as well. So all the different pieces that are needed for the hydrogen infrastructure need to come down in cost. So a hydrogen refueling station can't cost $1 million if they're going to be readily available, right? So they need to be mass produced. It's not just about the fuel cells and the electrolyzers. So I think every piece of the infrastructure needs more work for cost reduction. And there's also challenges on durability and upscaling of the technology to be mass produced. And finally, recycling is a topic that's not very often discussed. But for mass use of the technology, we need to have good recycling processes, and also we need to be able to design the systems for the ability to be recycled at the end of life. And with that, in that regard, circular economy, how to produce all the different parts of the system using circular economy approaches. This is an opportunity to do that now, as opposed to later. Since it's a relatively new technology, we can potentially harness that opportunity as we develop it. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Erik. And Mike?
Thanks a lot, Xianguo. I'm in agreement with everything I've heard thus far, so this isn't in any nature contentious. I think there are many issues to be dealt with for mass adoption. I can't help but thinking back, though, over the years before I delve into this question, the question you ask has been raised many times. I recall decades ago, hydrogen is just around the corner. By the next decade, we will see implementation in a range of areas, and it will start the shift in a large way from fossil fuels to this chemical carrier. And a few years after that, the same argument, and a few years after that, the same argument. And now today, I think we're in a way asking the same question: when will hydrogen come in a large scale way? I think it is much closer than it has been last times that I've heard this answered. I think we're much closer. Motivations have changed. The motivation decades ago would have been more energy security and energy supply, with hydrogen being one way to leverage renewable energy sources, especially during oil crises or other energy crises. Later, the impetus became more environmental overall, and people said, for reasons of environmental, not just efficiency or economics, we need to move to hydrogen. And now the particular shift within that has been climate change. And I think the severity of the predictions for what climate change will lead to, as we're hearing at these international conferences, are quite severe. And I think they necessitate hydrogen more than ever as a way of, again, leveraging non-fossil fuel energy sources. It's been important in these past arguments, but I think it becomes paramount now. So I think we're closer. In terms of what needs to be done, I was scribbling a few things while I was thinking of this. Economics, of course, is important. If it's not a competitive option, it's awfully hard to shift people over. People are altruistic to a point, but for the most part, economics drives a lot of their decisions. Now, that's not to say hydrogen on its own needs to be economic. Government can support it, provide incentives or taxation for alternatives to shift the economics so that hydrogen has a role to play that becomes economically attractive. Getting the environmental understanding of the benefits of hydrogen leveraging sustainable energy forms is important. I don't think that's fully understood. I still hear people talking about hydrogen as an energy source rather than a carrier or a currency that helps unleash the potential of other energy sources. Socio-political, I agree, fully important. If politicians aren't brought on board, decisions aren't made that are supportive. And if people aren't supportive, politicians never get on board. So getting the public educated and aware is hugely important. Technical, lots of things certainly to be done. And as Erik had just mentioned, infrastructure was one that jumped to my mind. You see that in the electrical car industry. Getting recharging stations across the country is of critical importance to adoption of electrical cars. Same thing will happen with hydrogen vehicles. If we can't get the infrastructure of refueling set up in an economically attractive way, it'll be very hard to go further than we are now in terms of mass adoption. And there's probably lots more I could say, but I want to hear what others have to say. So I'm going to stop now and pass it over.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Well, you are one of the veterans in the field, and you've been, serving as president of CSME, EIC, and so on. So you see a lot of bigger views than some of us. So your perspective, your historical, knowledge that you share with us, those are important for us to move forward. Yeah.
Thanks for pointing out my age, Xianguo. I appreciate it.
So that's
Just
not
kidding.
my intention. So thanks, Mike. And Pete, it's your turn now.
Yeah, I don't want to say the same all over again. I agree with what has been said so far, and I'd like to follow up on Marc's historical perspective. That's interesting to me. So I think one thing we've done in the R&D community over the last 20 or 25 years, and maybe until recently, was really to focus on, when we talk about hydrogen, lots of us talked about PEM fuel cells for automotive applications. Not all of us, but lots of us. And in a way, we're trying to solve the toughest problem first, in a way, right? Which, I mean, that going straight from internal combustion engines to a PEM fuel cell vehicle, it includes so many challenges. And we could have maybe taken smaller steps first, and to actually create a market for fuel cell applications. And I'm talking particularly about stationary fuel cells, but also electrolyzers, right? Where, as Marc said, the economics actually work out. And once you have a market that way, where economics play out, then of course we'll have further innovation that drives your products. So that sometimes I find this was maybe the biggest mistake we made in a way. I think Ballard also realized that in a sense, and they focused more on the heavy duty vehicle market. And I think that was a smart move, and that makes more sense in that area. But when we talk private PEM fuel cell automotive vehicles, that's a huge step to make. I also find this talk, again, what Marc was saying, I always say to people, fuel cells, PEM fuel cell vehicles are always 10 years away, and fusion is always 50 years away, and has been like this for 30 or 50 years. And it's a little bit like this, right? And so I think people need to see, to Erik's point, need to see that technology exists right now. It may be integrating existing technology into our energy mix and infrastructure where it makes sense. It's very important, I think, for people to see that this technology exists. I'm not, as much as I wish I was sold on the idea that climate change now becomes the main driver to move to hydrogen and fuel cells. Maybe so. I still think that, and it will happen, I think, over time, 20, 30-year time scale, I can see that. But if you're looking more at the 5 to 10-year time scale, I also think that energy security and the diversifying the existing energy mix is just as important a driver, really. And we see it. Xianguo alluded to that earlier on. Once you see a 5-fold increase in natural gas spot prices in Europe, within 3 months, this gets interesting, right? So I think the discussion of hydrogen might be a different one in the spring. And with that, I'd like to hand over to the next panelist.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Shuhui.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Lee. I totally agree all the comments and key opinion from all the previous speakers. Actually, I think for the hydrogen fuel cells, when people heard about the hydrogen fuel cells, I heard quite a lot of people ask their biggest concern is whether hydrogen is safe. I think that when we were taught, I think our middle school, when we learned about hydrogen, they thought it's easy to further exploration. When people when public know that there's hydrogen tank in the fuel cell car, they thought it's safe, whether it's safe. I think it is very important to let public know it's very safe, because research have done a lot of research and study. Hydrogen fuel cell car is even more safe. It's even safer than the gasoline car, right? Because in the outside, hydrogen is very light. So in case there are some leaking, hydrogen will go disperse very quickly. So it will not reach the limit for exploring. I think this is very important, like the safety issue. So if I think this time or with our demonstration, the public will accept the hydrogen fuel cell, hydrogen energy or hydrogen fuel cell is safe. It's very safe. And another one, I think, is also the price. The first generation for fuel cell car, Mirai from Toyota, is over $50,000 US dollars. So it's still more expensive than the regular gasoline car. I think even with the second generation fuel cell car, So it's cheaper, but still quite more expensive than the regular gasoline car. So even people, for the public people, they are interested in the hydrogen fuel cell car or hydrogen energy, but still the cost, I think, is one big concern. I think also for the third one is for the hydrogen station, whether it's convenient to to fill the gas hydrogen. So I think this will need for a lot of effort from the government. As Erik mentioned, for hydrogen gas station is very expensive, costs $1 million. So I think it will be the government effort with more hydrogen gas stations. So I think people will likely to buy the fuel cell car in the future. I think the other one is for the cost, also related to the technical issues. Because for me, I'm working on the catalyst for hydrogen generation and also for hydrogen fuel cells. For both technology, for the moment, the best catalyst is the platinum-based catalyst. But for platinum, it's very expensive and rare. So I think the people working on, I'm also working on for the low platinum and the non-platinum catalyst to replace the PT, try to significantly decrease the cost. I think, I think this is the 4 points that I want to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That it's a very good discussion. We talk about historical to socioeconomic to technical challenges. But before we move to the next questions, just a quick kind of recollections. Remember when cars, gasoline cars being available about 100 years ago, and the gas station are not available. People are carrying their own, gas tanks driving around. And so in that sense, before the infrastructure being available on a massive scale, if we have this, small solar-based recharging system like Honda did a few years ago in California. So when you park your car, you are doing your refueling and you save the costs on the refueling as well. This is kind of related to one of my colleagues. He actually lives on a farm near campus and he using biomass to make bio oil. So he never buy gasoline. He using bio oil to fuel his car. So something maybe you have to be creative as a transition somehow, if we could do so. I don't know, we just may have to be look at a little away from the existing oil gas kind of industry, the model they create for us, because a different energy system maybe requires to think something maybe different. The current thinking are all about the same, along the same traditional lines, and that will make it more challenging because somebody already there for over 100 years. Now we're new kids on the block trying to make something that may be something the whole community could think about taking a slightly different approach. I'm not sure any panelist has a quick comment on this.
I could add something, Xianguo.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what you said speaks to the thought that I had where to make change, I think it has to be easy for someone. I think that people generally don't like change unless it's beneficial to them or makes their life better in some way. So I think when you're talking about the changes we saw for automotive industry, people wanted to have a car, and I think we can't make people choose between cost and making a difference for the environment or energy security or things like that. And I think we're also in a position where the people who can worry about energy and climate change are generally people in positions of some privilege, fortunate, for myself, ever since I was a university student, I was in a position of being fortunate enough to think about climate change and energy security. So I think that when we work on these technical challenges, we're helping to drive down the cost so that we can make these decisions and these transitions easier for people. That's all I thought I could add.
Thank you, Amy. Any other? Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting thoughts, Xianguo, to raise, and Amy's response was interesting too. Getting people to think differently is, especially when it involves change, is difficult. It's always difficult. It's always been difficult. And you combine with it the politicization of so many issues nowadays, whether it's getting vaccines for COVID-19 or whether it's addressing climate change that seems to almost become a political mantra for people on one side or other of political fences. It makes it difficult getting people to understand the need for change and push that aside so the arguments stand for themselves is challenging, difficult, but it needs to be done. I think people need to appreciate the benefits that hydrogen as an energy carrier can bring. And yes, that will involve some change. My flip on that, though, is that's an engineering responsibility. Our job, I think, as engineers is to get that done behind the scenes so people simply can move forward and use the technologies they want and know that they are cleaner, less intrusive on the environment, less demanding on resources. Burden seems to always fall back on engineers. And I think this is one case where that's critical.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. In the interest of time, I'm probably going to move on to our next question. Next question about what kind of opportunities that do you, our panelists perceive for academic, research and development? And I know Amy needs to leave for her next commitment soon. So can I come back for you to start this discussion? Amy?
Sure, and thank you. I'm sorry I have to leave early for teaching, and I think that brings actually the most important thing to the front of the discussion is the students and the trainees, because I think one of the biggest opportunities for academia is to provide the next generation of experts to go into this field. I think when academics are working in this field, one of the biggest connections is with industry, because we can work on problems that maybe industry doesn't have time to focus on. They can work with us to work on things that they don't want to specialize in, to really advance the technology further at an accelerated pace. And the people that are working on those advancements are the trainees, the students, the postdocs. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for us to provide these experts. And these guys are also working on not just industry problems, but they're also looking at the fundamentals of the technology that can be applied more broadly to other technologies within the clean energy sector. So I think that's a huge benefit to the field as well. And then also academics can work on some blue sky thinking and some problems that are not necessarily the immediate need of the industry who has to think about today or the next year or two. And so when you have these experts that we're developing, they're thinking on blue sky problems, I think that's a huge opportunity for companies, for industry, government to think about where we're going to go in the future and be ready and not reactive. So I think those are some of the benefits, opportunities for academics. Thank you, Xianguo.
Okay, thank you, Amy. And I'm going to jump around instead of alphabetic. So maybe let's say, Pete, can I jump to you?
Yeah, sure. Following up on Amy, I would also say academic research can help identify what the most useful application of hydrogen technologies are in the respective country or jurisdiction. Export markets could also be a factor. So maybe it's not necessarily important what's only happening in your area. Also, what is your strength in terms of export markets? I think academics can actually help with that. Every country jurisdiction has to ask themselves, what are we good at? Are we better at fundamental research or the integration and application of existing technologies? And the answers will actually be different with different jurisdictions. So you have to ask yourself, what are we good at? What do we want to capitalize on? What is our capacity? And this will drive some of the decisions you make regarding research in your area. I still believe integration of existing technology is absolutely key, and academic research can certainly help with that. And fundamental aspects, I think there's many. I think radical innovation in manufacturing would be something to consider, right? We have to really drive down costs of these technologies. How do you do it? I'm not entirely sure, but we need radical innovation to really bring down the costs while not sacrificing performance. And that's sort of key, right? Sometimes it has to do with the kind of catalyst you're using, and other types. There's other factors to consider in this, but this is one of the main achievements, you need to pursue.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Okay, how about Erik?
Sure. Yeah, great things have already been said. From my perspective, I think I'd like to mention firstly that the fundamental research and the science, it's more important now than ever, right? Because now we're at the cusp of real world use of the technologies, and hydrogen as an energy carrier. It's a really exciting time ahead, right? And now more than ever, we need fundamental research, right? And that could be, related to fundamental understanding about the workings of the technology, new materials discoveries, new system configurations. There's endless opportunities there, actually. So I think that's my first point. It might feel that we might feel as researchers that the fundamentals have already been dealt with, and that we're in a good spot for that. But truthfully, I think that for the technologies to be commercialized and used in a widespread manner, I think that we need to reconsider that again, and actually consider the fundamentals more from the perspective of widespread usage, which we haven't really done so much in the past, right? So I think in the past, research has been a bit different, right? It's been more about making the technology work, kind of proving it, and then the big quest has been performance, right? So we've done everything to maximize the performance of the devices, and kind of ignored things like the basic cost of the materials and products and systems, right? So although the technology is now mature, there's still a lot of room for new inventions, new materials and breakthrough concepts, and in particular with emphasis on cost reduction, right? And when it comes to materials, the catalyst is obviously important, but we should also bear in mind that there are opportunities for major cost reductions on almost every component in the systems, right? And not just fuel cells and electrolyzers, but also these other parts of the system that I mentioned before. But when it comes to take the fuel cell as an example, the catalyst is one, but then you also have the membranes are actually quite expensive. They're quite specialized materials. The gas diffusion layers are still expensive for some reason, right? There's cost reductions even on that side. And then the bipolar plates, they're major cost, and also a big part on the volumetric power density of the systems. So that hasn't been researched very much. And then, other system components as well, right? Anything on the system front. So industry collaboration is really important at this stage, I think, for academic researchers. So to be able to have an impact and to be able to bring our inventions and advances into the community quickly, right? Like now, time is of essence. We need to have like firm industry collaborations, and long-term collaborations are really useful in this context. I have collaborated with Ballard for 13 years now, and the long-term aspect of that is really great, because you really get to know each other, and you really understand what the pain points are for the industry, and you develop all the processes so that everything is running very smoothly, right? So I think we can deliver a lot more as academics through such partnerships. And finally, academic role. We also have a role to play kind of as a service provider for the industry supply chain and value chain, right? Sometimes I think we need to consider ourselves as service providers. Like we are part of the supply chain, and we provide research services, right? And that could be solving problems of different kinds and natures, but also to explore and understand things that the industry is struggling with on their own, may not have resources to do, and providing analytical tools that most companies don't have is really important. So, and as Amy mentioned, the training aspect is absolutely critical, right? I think our role as educators and trainers is also increasingly important. You know, if education is an issue in society to get hydrogen to the masses, then our role as academics is obviously to provide that education, right? So it's a question of how do we best do that? And I think the research is a really nice way to do it. If we can get students involved in the actual hands-on research, there's nothing that educates you as well as running a fuel cell test on the test station. That's a very nice way to get educated on the technology and understand how it all works. And you know, if we can do that maybe for more broader society, I think that would be really useful. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Erik. Before we next speaker, just want to thank Amy. I know she had to leave for her teaching duties. Thank you very much, Amy, that you were able to join us within your busy time schedule.
Thanks so much, Xianguo. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so thank you. Okay, Marc, can I come into you?
Sure, thank you, Xianguo. Yeah, going back to the question of opportunities for academic research and technological development, yeah, there are many opportunities that I see, and the other speakers have already mentioned several. When it comes to academic research, I like to break it into two parts in my mind. The luxurious type that academics have the freedom to do, which is big ideas, new ways of thinking that go beyond incremental technical improvements, but allow us to think of new paradigms. And in the area of hydrogen, there is a lot of room for that, ways of thinking how hydrogen can benefit, not just by tweaking and bending and twisting existing systems, but by envisioning something entirely different that may take a decade or 2 decades or more to come to pass. As well, of course, there's room for incremental developments. Industry needs that so much from us, I think, where we technically can help and economically can help improve technologies. Within that, I'd still think of a lot of room for technical innovation and improvement, techno-economic, let's say, but also a lot of room for bigger picture societal type implication studies. I agree. Peter mentioned certainly the situation differs from location to location. In some locations right now, energy prices are high enough that certain hydrogen technologies make economic sense on their own, and they're starting to make inroads. In others, Canada has relatively lower in energy prices in many countries. It's still economically difficult to push these technologies, at least solely on economic grounds. In the technical area, lots of hydrogen production, ways to produce hydrogen. We can produce it now, we know how, but we get almost all our hydrogen nowadays from fossil fuels. Doing that for a hydrogen economy doesn't help us much at all. We might as well keep using the fossil fuels if all we're doing to think hydrogen is producing hydrogen from fossil fuels. So we're talking, I think, mainly about shifting away from that, and within that, how we produce hydrogen economically, competitively, reliably in large scale from non-fossil fuel sources still needs a lot of work. I know at my university, we're putting a lot of time on thermochemical water decomposition using either nuclear energy or high temperature solar energy. These are not economically competitive right away, but hopefully in the longer term, they can be. Ways to store hydrogen, still questions on the best way to get maximum storage capacity, hugely important in the automotive sector where it's awfully hard to convince people to sacrifice their trunk space for it to become a hydrogen storage tank in a vehicle because you need it to run 400 kilometers or so between charges. Fuel cells, making sure they work reliably in all conditions, including the cold in northern Canada. as well as hot, humid conditions remain challenges. Multi-generation or polygeneration applications where you integrate hydrogen with other technologies to kind of find sweet spots where you get the benefits of both technologies is also something that I think requires quite a bit of effort. I know I'm doing a lot of work where we look at ways of not just producing hydrogen or using it, but linking that with other technologies, be it desalination or other power generation options, in a way that we get maximum benefits, be it environmental, economic, efficiency, or other. So I see lots of room for academic research, both in the societal realm as well as in the pure technological development realm. I'll pass back to you now, Xianguo.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. And Shuhui?
Okay, thank you. I totally agree with the previous comments. Here, I think first, I think for our university researchers, we focus on the fundamental research. I think recently, with the faster development of advanced characterization techniques, for example, for the high resolution TM, we can see the single atoms. In the past, it was not possible. And also with some advanced in situ characterization techniques, we can see the, the real, for example, for fuel cells, for in situ measurement, we can see the water distribution, water measurement, and also for the catalyst active site decay. I think that this advanced characterization techniques are very important for research to study the underlying mechanisms, the structure, property, relationships. This is very important to further improve the performance of the hydrogen generation or hydrogen fuel cells or other energy devices. And I think another one is for the collaboration. So even one person is very powerful, but he cannot do everything. So we need a collaboration with academics, for different with different activities. For me, I'm a material scientist, also for electrochemist for energy device, but I have many years of collaboration with other colleagues for simulations, and also for example, with a lot of collaboration with Canadian light source for synchronizes. This is very important for the improvement for the materials and also for energy device. And another collaboration is very important for collaborate with industry. This is very important to transfer our lab results to the practical applications. For example, in our lab, we work on small devices, but if for the scale up, for the larger device, there are still many practical problems. So the industry know the problems. And in the end, the industry and the user for our technology. I think this is very important for collaborate with academic and also the industry. I think the Canada now they trying to push and encourage the collaboration with the industry. They create a new alliance program and let the industry put the cash. But I think I could do more. I think recently, probably last month, see the news, Germany is put a lot of energy and funding on the hydrogen research. I think they announced in summer, they put I think around 3 billion European euros on the hydrogen economy, hydrogen research. This is very important. They claim they have another several billion euro research funding to come soon. I think in Canada, probably could invest more on hydrogen energy because it's a sustainable clean energy. It's very important to our future and our future sustainable society. I think probably since this workshop from between Canada and Turkish, probably we can also think about some collaboration, some joint grant. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. These are very excellent discussions. And that tied up actually to our very first question very nicely. when our panelists, identify socioeconomic being one of perhaps the sticking out issue in preventing the mass adoption of hydrogen fuel cells. To say on economic side, really, if we have a good fundamental research leading to a novel technology, and that will leading to the actual cost reduction. And for example, Toyota has a plan that are based on the novel materials and the improved manufacturing techniques. They plan to reduce fuel cell cost by 50%, by 2025. So that's a substantial reduction, and show that this fundamental research can have a significant contribution to the economic aspect of this new technology. Now, at this point, there are questions being asked, and actually stemming from Erik's discussion and everybody's response. So the question is that how can we reduce the platinum loading on catalyst layer or PEM cost without losing the PEM fuel cell performance? So let's open up for our panelists to respond to this question. Since that was stemming from Erik's response earlier from the question asked. So Erik, will you care to lead this response?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to start. So thank you, Dr. Almadi, for the question. So I'll hand over to others, and in particular Shuhui on the catalyst front. But I'll give you my 2 cents first. So how can we reduce platinum loading without losing the performance, right? I think in some ways this has already been successfully done in many ways, actually. But in particular, I'm thinking about the alloying of the platinum with other metals, and that's, I think, already proven that you can maintain fuel cell performance with such alloys. So basically, replacing a portion of the platinum particle with secondary metal like cobalt or nickel is a great way to reduce the platinum loading without sacrificing performance. And I'll leave it for Shuhui to continue on that conversation. On the membrane front, my opinion is that the membrane cost can definitely possibly be reduced without sacrificing performance. And I think that there are already a number of new hydrocarbon-based membrane technologies that have been developed that have competitive proton conductivity, right? And when it comes to membranes and their effect on the fuel cell performance, it's really about proton conductivity and the thickness of the membrane, right? And I think that alternative membrane chemistries can be manufactured at the same thickness level as pre-existing membranes. So on the thickness, it's okay. On proton conductivity, I think it's pretty well established now that it's possible to reach the same or possibly even greater conductivity than for naphthalene. So that's actually a really promising direction. But then with these novel materials, then the cost is not necessarily performance, but rather durability, right? And also integration with other pre-existing materials. So they might not work so well in conjunction with existing catalyst layers and so on. So there are still challenges, but I think in terms of performance, I think it's possible technically to maintain performance.
Okay. Thank you, Erik. Anybody else care to respond?
Yeah, maybe I can add.
Yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
Go on. No, go on.
No, Peter, you can go.
Just quickly, Erik is right. Durability is another issue, of course, about your catalyst, right? So when you have steady state operation, as in PEM fuel cell electrolyzers, that makes your life a little easier than when you have non-steady state operation. The other thing is the utilization, of course, of your catalyst particles. So there's one way to bring down the amount of platinum over the years being used is if you design your catalyst layers in a way that you have maximum utilization of the platinum you actually have in it, right? So these are two other ways. It's not just Not just the amount that's in your catalyst layer, it's also, you know, how it's being utilized.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay. So I totally agree. I think Erik also mentioned that for for platinum alloys, I think for Toyota, they are using for platinum cobalt in their Mirai fuel cell, the alloys. This is one direction. I think another one is for me, in the past, we have developed, you know, for PT-based catalysts, their perform activity or durability highly depend on their shape, morphology, or composition alloy, and also morphology. In the past, we have developed different novel nanostructures. You know, for platinum commercial catalyst, it's platinum nanoparticles 225 nanometer on common support. We change the nanoparticle from spheres to one-dimensional nanowires or nanotubes. The size, the diameter is 4 nanometer, but the length can be up to 100 nanometers. We found the activity has been over nanowires 3 times better than nanoparticles, and its durability is 5 times more durable than the commercial catalyst. I think this is this product we work with collaborate with Kjeang. A few years ago, we still work on PEM fuel cells. And another one is you know, for durability is very important. I think basically for PT catalyst for the moment, for, you know, it's okay, it's acceptable. Another more direction to you know, is to replace the PT. It's a nano metal catalyst, such as for the iron-based catalyst. You know, we developing this one and collaborate with Bazylak. The performance is like activity is equivalent to platinum. This is the record, but still the durability is not competitive. Still, it's not efficient, sufficient for commercialization. So we are still working on this, and also agree with Peter. You know, for the catalyst layer, its design is very important. It's not only related to the platinum loading. It's for the utilization, and also for the catalyst layer, you know, the mass transport is very important for the related to the water and for the gas. I think for the catalyst layer or the electrode design, the microstructures is very important to further improve the performance and also for the durability. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any quick response from others, which actually Marc now? And no, okay. Yeah, I think this is really a good question that about the platinum loading reduction and the PEM material itself. Oh, sorry, Mike. Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Because I believe that fuel cell hydrogen, if we want really to be successful and addressing the economic issues, we need some sort of paradigm shift or a fundamental line of thinking in some way that can reduce the cost drastically. And one quick kind of analogy example coming to my mind that over 100 years ago, maybe 120 years ago, at the time, aluminum was more expensive than gold because aluminum was so expensive, elaborate in its manufacturing process. Until the electrolytic process coming in, now we all know aluminum is the cheapest metal that we can, you know, buy for construction. So I think in fuel cell and hydrogen, some of this kind of paradigm shift may be really needed. And some of it I've seen, for example, there's a so-called combined or hybrid fuel cell, where anode acting like a PEM fuel cell, so that the hydrogen oxidation goes very quick, while the cathode process is like an anion change membrane or alkaline fuel cell, so that platinum catalyst is not needed. And so something like that, people been trying these fundamental, you know, but novel research may really lead to someday really a breakthrough. So, okay, coming back, Mike, to you.
Sorry, Xianguo, can I just add to that?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So yeah, inherently, I mean, we're talking quite a bit about fuel cells now. There's other hydrogen technologies, but speaking about fuel cells. So Erik described very eloquently, there are multiple materials inside the fuel cell. There's a multitude of transport processes and other physical processes, which have to be optimized at the end of the day, right? We want to optimize cost, we want to optimize performance and durability. And one technology which is now, of course, making inroads in material science is machine learning. So there is now already machine learning being used in optimizing materials such as solar cells. Now, whether this will happen in fuel cells or other technologies, I don't know. But if you have a large parameter space of a material that you want to optimize, right, and rather than just having your grad student poking around the parameter space, making a material, guessing that might improve the performance or not, machine learning can maybe aid you and support you in making educated guesses of where the optimization has to go. This hasn't happened yet in this field and in other fields that I'm aware of in hydrogen technologies, but it may happen.
Yeah, this is actually a very popular and important approach. I know that all these big companies have been actually employing it. They may not be telling outside. And interesting, recently, even a new startup company in somewhere in Silicon Valley, they hire a guy from MIT, a postdoc, being hired, and he has nothing to do with fuel cell, but he has been just on the machine learning algorithm technique development. So he being hired to actually using AI to develop a better fuel cell technology. So that was interesting because he has no fuel cell hydrogen background. So it's complete from outside and taking a fresh look on. Sometimes we are in the field for too long, we're being, stereotyped and thinking in the traditional way. So they want somebody to be completely off the wall, brainstorming and see if something may be crazy, but may be revolutionary that may come out of it. So that's really, it's a important topic that Peter kind of pointed out here. Okay, we have another question from the audience. Asking the panel to comment on the hybrid system that are combining batteries and fuel cells. Now they're only asking for comments, so I'm not sure what exact the angle they're looking at it. Any panelists care to respond to this?
I can take a stab at it.
Yeah.
So hybridization of batteries and fuel cells is logical, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost necessary. I think I would probably say that it is necessary, right, for most deployments, and that is because we need batteries to power some of the different technologies and options and systems and so on, auxiliary parts. And we also need batteries for regenerative braking to capture the waste energy meaningfully. So fuel cell electric vehicles are electric vehicles, right? And hydrogen is kind of a supplement to the regular electric vehicle operation. And in many ways, I think hybridization between fuel cells and batteries is easier than hybridization between combustion engines and batteries, right? So why wouldn't we do it? We're already doing it for combustion engines, right? And of course, there are benefits associated with that and the opportunities associated with that. When it comes to the research and opportunities for research, I would say that there is not actually a lot of meaningful literature on hybridization. I think it's quite thin and a bit scattered, right? So there's still a need for more research on that, how to best hybridize. There are a lot of different, battery technologies. There are a lot of different options for fuel cell technologies, and where it's going in the future, it's still a bit uncertain. So I think that from a system perspective, it would be really nice to come up with really strong system designs for hybridization that could help provide lower cost operation and more durable operation. And that's something we're involved in to some degree in my group, trying to use hybridization to enhance the durability of the system.
Okay, yeah. The audience actually clarified it is from durability point of view, looking at the hybrid system combining and fuel cells.
So let me follow up then, just on a note. I just ended on the note of durability without seeing that. Just one aspect is we don't want our fuel cells to run at open circuit voltage conditions, right? So we don't want them to idle too much. And that's where a hybridization can be really useful, right? So the degradation of fuel cells is very high at low current or high cell voltages, which happens at open circuit voltage, and we can avoid that with hybridization with batteries.
Okay, now I know that we are running towards the end, only about 5 minutes or so left. So I would like to have kind of quick going around the table for our panelists to wrap up this session by putting their kind of own perspective on the potential future or where the future may be for hydrogen fuel cells. If you can care to, keep your response within about 1 minute or so. Okay. And anybody care to start with first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Happy to start, Xianguo.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Thanks. To wrap up, I guess there are 3 points that come to mind that perhaps haven't been dwelled on too much. First is the whole point of hydrogen energy, I think, can't be lost, which really is energy sustainability. It's to allow us to provide energy services in a sustainable manner, meaning reliable, secure, efficient, environmentally benign, economically acceptable, durable, etc. That hydrogen isn't for its own sake. It leverages better energy options too. Moving targets. Developing hydrogen technologies is not easy, but we have competitive pressures. There are other technologies that are advancing, like electric vehicles versus hydrogen vehicles, and it's a leapfrog often trying to come up with something better, knowing the competition is looking for something better. It's a bigger challenge. And thirdly, predictability, or acting with lack of predictability. Long-term hydrogen investment requires long-term thinking, but it's awfully hard when energy prices fluctuate. One day they're shooting upward, one day they're coming down, and people aren't predicting long-term high prices. Makes it really hard to make long-term investments. So we have to operate within that uncertain environment of lack of predictability going forward. If we can get predictability from politicians, that really helps, but otherwise we have to simply struggle within that. And those are my final thoughts. I'll pass it back, Xianguo.
Thank you, Marc. And who else next?
Yeah, I can maybe go next.
Go ahead.
Yeah, since this is an event between two countries and also at the political level, maybe I'd like to add a couple of comments. I think we should all consider fossil fuels as a one-time endowment that was only given to us so we can transition to a renewable infrastructure in the first place. It's not that we use that stuff up and then, oh man, now we have to transition. So I think with that sort of change of philosophy, if you look at the world that way, it really informs your decisions. I mentioned I lived in Norway for a while, and that sort of, it took the Norwegians a long time. They just use the fossil fuels too, of course. But I think in their mindset, they're there. And that's where they're leading the way in many ways, and different parties on the same page. So that's sort of the political level. And then I like to re-emphasize that I think every jurisdiction has to identify what makes sense to them locally. That's very important, I think. You simply can't compete, in certain areas, depending on who you are, of course. You can't compete in every field with everyone else out there, right? So identify your strength and pursue that strength with what Marc said, with a long-term perspective.
Okay, well, thank you, Pete. And anybody else? Okay, Shuhui.
Okay,
I can go. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. So I think in Europe they announced by 2035 they will ban the selling for the new vehicle based on fossil fuels. That means I think in other countries in Canada, US, they also have the similar timeline. That means by that time, so all the new vehicle has to be two choices. One is for the battery vehicles, another one for the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So hydrogen fuel cell production, storage, and also hydrogen use, hydrogen fuel cells are very important. I think there's a very good time, government to promote a collaboration between, research, university, academia, and also industry. I think this is a good opportunity. I think on the other hand, as I mentioned, Europe or other countries have put a lot of funding on hydrogen research. I think Canada also realized this issue. Hopefully, Canada or Turkish, the two countries can put some funding to promote the collaborations between researchers and industry, and also researchers, industry between these two countries. I think this will be great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So Erik?
Yeah, just quickly, I echo that. More industry and university collaborations and partnerships, and also more international collaborations. It's been historically quite difficult to have international projects, right? Mainly due to the funding requirements. So more such international partnerships would be very meaningful at this stage. Another point I want to add is let's look hard for low-cost hydrogen fuel sources, right? And ways to produce it at really low cost. And it can be done locally. There's waste hydrogen sources available. There's surplus renewable energy that we can use to convert to hydrogen at low cost, right? Relatively speaking. And let's start from there and deploy it as quickly as possible, and then build it up from there. So let's identify the low cost opportunities for hydrogen fuel.
Wonderful, thank you, Erik. And our time's up, so I'd like to thank all the panelists for your wonderful, ideas and contribution, and thank all the audience for your, participation and the questions. And now, Naomi, should I end here, or you're going to take it over?
I can take over, and I want to thank you so much for doing such a great job moderating this panel and for organizing such a great group of panelists. It was very interesting, so thank you, Xianguo.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
So, and I'd also like to extend my thanks to everyone for being here with us today, and for all the audience for their participation and for the great questions. So if some of you would like to leave, because I'm sure, much like Amy, you have classes to do or you've got a lot of other things to do, but I will just wrap up very briefly. So this was the end of the first day of the inaugural Canada-Turkey Hydrogen Technologies Workshop, and we had a really good mix of panelists. I think we went from industry, academics, and government organizations, so we covered a lot of topics. So I hope tomorrow, everyone will come back for day 2. I think it's a little bit of an easier day tomorrow. We have 2 presentations and 1 panel discussion, but it should be equally as interesting. In the audience, for the members that are still listening, should you have any additional questions, my email address is on the website. And so feel free to reach out to me if you would like to ask any of these illustrious panelists any additional questions, and I'll pass those along. And also, if you have any questions for previous panelists or previous presenters from today, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to facilitate introductions and make connections where possible. Thank you all so much for being part of this. It's very much appreciated. And I guess for most of you, I'll wish you a good day. For us here in Turkey, it's already evening. We'll probably all be going to have dinner now. But merci beaucoup et à la prochaine. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you all, and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.